wonderful commentary and look forward to seeing more, actually. So thank you. And thank you, Tracy, for the fantastic kind of infrastructure your book put forward for us to have this series and interleave some of our foreign partners in interesting ways also. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
And thank
you,
you for the
Winsome,
opportunity. The book, for those of you who just came for this part and didn't come to the first two, was born actually during COVID, which was kind of crazy. So it's a lived experience based on the course that we teach at Harvard, which is it's a flipped course that has a synchronous meeting time, but we're also work with schools in 40 different countries around the world, Joyce Miriam in Brazil, in India, and realized that all the multiple challenges, and the ask was, what will remain after COVID? What are things that work online as well as face-to-face? What are things that we could actually, what is worth spending time doing, because teachers are so pulled in so many directions during COVID, trying to upskill and learn how to do things. What is worth really investing in? And we'd hope that we synthesize this into, it's a very manageable, small and readable handbook, but it's meant to sort of say these are things that will live beyond COVID because they're just best practice thanks to the learning sciences. And so we're learning a lot more from that. And I don't know, Karen, if you had a question related to that, because you said that you might, if you want to ask it now, great. Otherwise, I'll stick around. But did you want to say something, Karen? Or is this for another time? There you go.
Okay, so I haven't been able to unmute until just now. I'm so sorry.
You did it. You did it.
It's good that I'm part of something learning about digital technology, obviously, but I've been trying. So in your book, you mentioned 12 types of thinking. It says pending. And so can we get that information? It was in the reference. It looked like, and I cannot remember where it was exactly, but you mentioned 12 types of thinking.
Actually, 15 different levels of consciousness that were related to, I will share right now an infographic that sort of describes that, but it's actually an article that's in review right now. But we've found this, we're looking focused mainly on writing and trying to figure out when people said, oh, I'm a bad writer, or I don't know how to write, or I didn't write very much today. We realize that what schools do is celebrate the written product. They don't celebrate the thinking behind the writing. And as we documented this, we found that so many people where the writing process involves so many levels of thinking. And then we started to look into that and figure out, well, actually, yes, deep reflection is one thing, planning is another, but when you give somebody else feedback on written work, or when you're actually giving them time to mind wander, all of these different things we established were important in the actual writing process. And then we realized it wasn't just writing, which was very interesting. And so we're writing, this is in review with the Columbia University Teachers College Press, but I will share the infographic, which is really cool, that actually looks at all these distinct levels of consciousness. And the hardest ask of that whole book was trying to establish the neural pathways that were related to things like reflection versus things like when editing is a totally different mental process. Those are, you can feel it in your head when you're doing it, but what is actually going on there? So we spent a whole lot of time just looking at these distinct neural processes related to this. And I will share this right here just briefly for anybody who's curious, but I will also put the link. The model itself is just that there's the idea of toggling between these different levels of thinking, and this one is specifically written up for writing.
Yeah.
But the ability to toggle between, semantic understanding of information, linking that to what you already know, letting yourself mind wander and be able to reflect, mapping out links between ideas. All of these are different levels of consciousness, and actually you can find, which is fascinating, if you piece all of these things together, there are distinct neural networks, which is the idea of toggling between these levels is something that I think all teachers know how to do intuitively, but the idea here is how do you actually map this? And we map this on a spider rubric where kids actually let you know how much time, like they spent a whole lot of time researching and then they didn't have enough time to write, or they spent a lot of time mind wandering but didn't ever, map out their ideas, or they spent forever outlining but they didn't have enough time to revise, or whatever it is. So you do a spider rubric, which allows the students to see where they spent their time. So they themselves can self-assess what they would do better the next time. Okay, I see that I spent way too much time just thinking about this. Maybe I needed to spend more time in the drafting stage of this thinking. And so we've attached about 20 to 100 activities to each of those different levels of thinking so that students and teachers can sort of leapfrog that process. When the kid realizes they didn't spend enough time drafting and they don't know how, well, we've linked us to activities. So that's kind of what's in the works in the write-up, but I've just put in the chat the hyperlink to that infographic so that you can have a look at that if you'd like to think through, if you have any idea. And there's also a video on the learningsciences.com that explains we call it Think Right. It's writing to think and thinking to write. But basically, the presumption is that writing is the highest form of thinking. And we actually tried to show how complex it was at so many different levels. And but trying to make this something that's very accessible to teachers was the goal here. So was that the question?
Can I ask what? That was perfect.
Okay.
And
Okay.
the infographic, I'm looking at the same time as thinking. So I've been reflecting over the last couple of weeks, and I'll throw this out there for anybody who wants to answer. And if you don't have time, that's okay. Maybe next one. But I was thinking of what is the number one hindrance to learning, and trying to break it down into one thing. And I thought judgment, and whether that's self, others, feedback, even, because I think after watching the Hole in the Wall, I think it's more, I used to think economic, and now I think more judgment, and just curious what others thought.
I love that you're parallel thinking. One of the biggest things to come out of the new ABCDs, the adolescent brain and cognitive development studies, that are this huge National Institutes of Science project trying to figure out what's going on in the preteen through teenage brain, or whatever, 8 to 24, basically. The really interesting thing coming out of that is what a silly myth this whole, underdeveloped frontal lobe idea is. What's not working well are decision-making networks, the choices, when to self-regulate and just buckle down and focus, self-regulation, choices about things. So your idea of judgment is really interesting, and I see a direct link to where a lot of current research is pointing. So I like that. I don't know, Winsome, do you have other directions you would say, aside from, I know that I would never say there's one single problem, because every one of us is so multifaceted in all of the different ways that we can look at learning problems.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
but I do think that that's a good place to start.
It is a good place to start. And I think what's nice about that piece is that it's not just from the neuroscience that you would look at judgment, certainly from the social sciences, behavioral sciences. I think right now we're really looking at such big inequities in education, and a lot of that really is through that judgmental lens, where your background, your zip code, there's so many things there. So I think that's, I think economics might even fall into that too. It's a bigger framing, I'm thinking. Really intrigued by that, actually. I have to put some thought into it. I hadn't thought about it before, but it is an intriguing thought. So thank you.
I want to know what Andrea thinks about that question, because you have another perspective also from things, especially looking at equity and special needs and all the rest of that. What do you think about that?
Well, that's a long conversation, but I do think, everything's interleaved, right? At the very outset, if there are economic differences, if that means that you're living in a different biome, or that moms maybe aren't as well nourished as they might be, that means that very, very many things are going to develop differently. So the state of the organism at the outset is going to be very much matched to the ecology in which it develops. And so basically the brain is going to optimize for the environment it's raised in. And so, the psychology will map on top of that, but the brain's going to develop the way the brain develops. And if that means that a child is going to develop to have maybe an attentional set that is scanning the environment more for basic needs, et cetera, then that's not going to be optimized for sitting in front of a screen, so everything is going to be different at the outset. So
Yeah.
I always say we evolved in the ecology that exists to survive in that ecology. And so really the context shifts that we make
Yeah, Andrea, just to add to that,
are going to be very
I was,
important.
sorry, Andrea, go on.
Yeah, so I said the context shifts that we need to
Yes.
impose when children go into school, and how to scaffold all their strengths into that context is going to be really interesting, because we
Yeah.
often think of kind of deficit model, when really developing differently in many ways gives you a variety of strengths. But how do you optimize those strengths by matching the environment to the strengths of the learner too?
Right. And how do you have opportunities to be able to
Right.
contextualize your decision? I like the idea of this decision-making piece through the ABCD study. So thank
I
you
would
for
just
that.
say, Karen, if you wanted to look at the Harvard bundles, there's a lot about what Andrea is talking about in the neurodevelopmental bundle, but there's also the big debate. There's a bundle on policy. There's also one that's very interesting that kind of bridges this into epigenetics. Only you are, as Andrea is talking about, people sort of try to, your brain is going to maximize for the environment it's in. However, it's a dynamic exchange between what you're born with and then the stimulus you get afterwards. And so how does that work? And so there's another bundle on epigenetics and neuroplasticity that might be of interest, because there are several articles there that talk about that really fragile balance. You can be born with the best genes in the world and have lousy environment, or vice versa, right? And so what ends up happening to these very special kids who are born at a disadvantage, but then become advantaged because school actually provided something so drastically different from the home that, how is it that some of these kids, make it out there? You'd love the work of Jeffrey Canada in Harlem. He's done this wonderful things of, he had the nature and the nurture weren't going for these kids, yet all of them, he gets them all to go all the way through to university by nurturing their mothers in early, prenatal care, early stimulation, all this other stuff. How did he do it? Well, he basically said, you're not going to be hostage to your genes or your zip code. We can choose, like you're saying, judgment calls, but we can choose to do things different in our policies, where we put our money. Instead of putting money in, putting people in jails, we should put money into early stimulation and mother care, prenatal
Right.
care. So it's a very different, I don't want to get political, but there are whole bundles that go into all of these different angles of approaches, because it's multifaceted. It's really hard to say what is the one thing, but I think you've sparked a good conversation.
Oh, to be clear,
I
I
did-
think that nature is ongoing. I don't see it as what you're as set by any means.
Can I ask a question? Because on Tracy's pedagogy, you mentioned the universal design, and how does this fit to this issue of the disabilities children, how this is working?
One of the ways, concretely, one of the things is, it's almost like looking for what is our lowest, if you're teaching whatever you're teaching, you realize you have an audience. These are groups of kids that come to me with a variety of life experiences. And if you can gauge, you can't teach them if you don't know them. So where is their starting point? And the idea of universal design is basically baking into the structure of your class safety nets for the lowest common denominator, as well as all those kids who are high flyers and need extra stimulus, in our class. What is not just the average? This is what we've done in schools, is trying to shoot to the average, which doesn't really exist. So it's knowing what different people will need, what they're coming into. So being able to create, for example, we use bundles to differentiate homework. So in the schools in very poor areas of Hawaii, for example, they don't have internet, they don't have access to a lot of things, and the teachers already know, he's coming from that neighborhood. We already know that he's already coming with a deficit. Nobody's read to him since he was born. He's going to start school, whatever. So what they do in their kindergarten classes is they start off knowing that these kids aren't going to have these prerequisite knowledges to do kindergarten work. They actually have bundles, which can be games or worksheets or apps or things that will help that kid shore up that prerequisite knowledge so that everybody can have a starting point to reach the objectives of whatever level. And so the concept of universal design is creating the format of my class has the safety nets so that independent of your starting point, you'll get what you need. You can fill in your prerequisite missing knowledge so that we can continue to construct towards the global objective we all share for that level or whatever it is. And so if I don't know if that's the answer you were looking for, but that's
Yes,
the concept
because
of
we have been using this principle, but towards the design of learning environments, but not in the cognitive process. So we have to, this is
it's
very
an idea-
important to
it's an
think
idea
about the
from-
cognitive process. Yeah.
because originally it came from architecture, right? Like
Yes.
some people can do steps, everybody can do ramps,
Yeah.
build
Very
ramps.
nice.
Well, the same thing in education. Some kids are going to be able to know the 20 sight words when they first start school, and some aren't. So you should start you should create the opportunities that kid who doesn't come in with the prerequisite knowledge can fill in those gaps so that you can still meet your overall goal for the group, right? So it's the same concept as universal design in architecture, but it's how we design our classroom experiences to create the resources so that everybody can reach the objective. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, this is so timely, Tracy, what you just said, because I know at least here in the US, we're wrestling with this idea of learning loss right now. And the answer to that that's coming out is accelerated learning. But accelerated learning, at least the way it's being described, it's really about just in time. So to me, it's really, you know, what you just explained, you know, learning design principles, if you will. To me, it's all about, you know, concepts like differentiated instruction, scaffolding. There are all kinds of ways to do it. But the idea is you don't work on the prerequisites separately and then hold students back to get to what we're calling grade level work, but you're doing them concurrently. So I think
the idea of the bundles, I think, is so powerful because what we've actually seen it work really well is that the teachers, for example, 7th grade, the teachers always complain, here we are, 7th grade math, they should have learned all this other stuff in primary school. How did they ever get passed up to 7th grade? And here they don't have these basic notions of math. So what does the teacher do? They create bundles in their classroom where they tell the students, look, you guys, autonomy, you guys get to choose one or two of the resources in the bundle for this week's topic and come prepared to do this kind of work. So the kids go in and they choose what level of things they need. So the kids get to be in charge of understanding. And what's so fascinating is because they want to choose the right thing, they actually spend much more time doing the homework because they'll try this one, they'll try this game, oh no, they'll try the other thing, oh, they'll also watch the video. So they actually do a lot more to try to shore up their own information. And so the creation of the bundles to differentiate homework also stimulates autonomy and choice by the students to actually say, I know I'm not ready to do tomorrow's work. I need to do these kinds of things. So in addition to having the flipped video, this is the basic concept. I don't know some of those basic concepts. And the teacher says, if you're still confused by negative numbers, make sure you go to the bundle and do that before you come to class. So basically it's helping the kids self-identify those prerequisite chunks that they might be missing so that they can then be participatory in the class. So you're right, don't pull them out of the class. I think that's the worst thing you can do because then you also add this emotional stigma to the whole thing. Even though it's easier on the teacher, one-on-one instruction, it's not good for the kid. So that you allow the kid in the flipped environment, you allow the kid the asynchronous work to do his individual practice. So that when we're together, we do the things we can all do together. And that gives you that sense of community and it's a different way to teach. It's very different. So, yeah.
And very needed now in this time. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Do you mind
Go
if I just say one thing? After the last meeting, I got so excited about bundles. I created my whole class, and I think it can go the other way too. I added extension bundles, like based on what we're doing. If you want to take it to the next level, click on these. And I'm not through yet, but I love the idea, and I think it can go both directions to help pull those kids that might be a little bit behind and those kids that want to delve in deeper.
Yep. You get the kids. I mean, I think that we do a huge disservice to gifted kids in our schools because there's just as many of them as kids with special needs, and we pay less attention to them. And they're bored to tears in our classroom, and they don't find the challenge, and they disengage for other reasons. So you're right. So the idea is to design a universal design structure. You basically figure out, this is my average kid, whatever that might be, and there might be none of them. And where are my most needy kids going to be, needing to fill in gaps, and where are my high flyers? And then you provide the resources. You don't have to do a different instructional plan. You just provide the bundles that have the range so that you can have differentiated homework. And that makes all the difference in the world to the students. So anyways.
So I
great.
just want to say, yeah, Tracy, that we're getting some really good comments in the boxes. People have to go. Andrea, Bob, and me at least, we've talked about the timing for these webinars over and over, and what the right length is, and some were too long and some were too short, and and the more I'm thinking about this, someone just said the conversation is bursting with ideas in this after meeting discussion. Perhaps we should flip the after meeting to during, which we've tried many times to have these breakout and all. So I'm feeling more like we need to go to some kind of more seminar formats with some of these, because
But
I agree.
That was the whole point of the idea was, if we flip the conference, we send the things beforehand. People
Yes.
send their questions. We respond to a handful of questions, and then it's just opened up because people will be ignited with their own thoughts and contribute. But we are so insecure that we don't do that. We do not leave it. We want to
timing is part of it, Tracy. I think the timing too. I think we need to talk about that, because if you flip it and you even give an hour and a half, we're over an hour and a half, and now we're getting to these big ideas of bundles and how to use it for differentiated instruction. So yeah, Andrea, Bob, and I will go back to this conversation, but it might very well be that we do some of these webinars, but we elevate the conversations into deeper kind of workshop style seminars, or because it's the flipped idea is great, but even an hour and a half doesn't seem like it's the right amount.
But what we could also do is create the bundles for the conference. This means that everything that we would have talked about was already sent in bundle access. So if anybody was really into the idea of bundles, or they had these big questions about neurodevelopment, or if they had whatever, that was already out there for them before they come to the live session. But then it does take a very special and very motivated person to come to a free webinar to do this. We hold our students hostage in Harvard, and they all do it religiously, right? Because that's the structure of the course. You have to visit the bundles beforehand. You have to watch it. So everybody does that. But when you have this format, there's a lot more loose organization. So it's hard to make those presumptions. But I love and really deeply appreciate, Winsome, Andrea, that you guys were open enough to entertain doing something very different from the way typical webinars are run. Because I do think it can be much deeper than I get bored to tears, turn my camera off, and I just walk around the house doing other things when I'm on a typical webinar. I would hope that people don't feel like that when they come to the things in the Global Science of Learning Network. So, okay.
So we need to say thank you back to you, Tracy, for, also giving your time and your expertise and writing a book and planning out. There's a lot that you've done to push this idea. So we want to thank you back, and
it's so funny. And Andrea, I want you to come. I want you to actually, I would actually put in paperwork. I'd love you to be the teaching fellow in the Harvard class next semester. So then you can actually live it and see it and breathe it and realize how cool it actually is. It's a great format. It's a different instructional design.
It sounds like a great format. I was just laughing because
joking.
If you give me more than 2 things to do before a video conference, I probably won't do more than 2 things. Truth is.
But then if the we require we tell you, you can take the quiz 1,000 times. I don't care how many times you take it. I just want you to know the vocabulary and the concepts. But if all of the vocabulary and concepts are in the video, and your ability to respond to the discussion board prompt is based on the content of the video, then you do all of the things because they're all
They are
related.
connected, yeah, yeah. So I think I'm gonna cut us off at noon. If
Yes.
you, noon, that would be
Okay.
Eastern time, but Miriam has a few.
I want just to make a comment that I mentioned when I was speaking, is that because after the video, I began thinking how I'm going to show that, how I'm going to exchange that with the teachers. No, I know that this is a seminar and that's all, but in terms of integrating, one thing that I felt that we could integrate the pedagogies very well. And I think this is a challenge, maybe a next step to think about. No, that
Just do you get to the big point of explicit and implicit teaching? And when
Yes.
we teach a course called How to Teach Online, but I would say that 70% of what people learn is simply by being a student in the class. They live the experience of flipping they live these things. It's not, we don't call it out and we don't say, use the bundles for this reason. They live it and they get it. But if you
Yeah.
don't live it, it's really hard to get it. So I know that it
That's
seems
right.
kind of overwhelming and challenging, but it's I hope, that we can leverage this because it's a much deeper experience to be able to have those exchanges. So,
yeah.
and I
that's
love
right.
listening to you, Miriam, and to Jyoti, and to hearing Andrea and Winsome's ideas and Fanny's comments and having those things. That dynamic is what should happen in the synchronous meeting.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, what's the point of going to a webinar where the talking head speaks to you for an hour? Well, you could have just watched that on a video. Why did you bother blocking somebody's time for that? So anyways, hopefully we can shift our thinking on that. But thank you so much, you guys. I really appreciate it and look forward to whatever. I hope you guys get well-deserved vacations, you folks, and then we can pick things back up soon. Okay.
True.
Thank
I do hope everyone gets some good rest. Thank you all. And, let's just give a round of applause for everyone who stayed on to almost
Thank
noon
you.
Eastern time today.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you for
thanks.
this meeting.
Yes, have a great rest of the summer, and do follow us. I did put the link to G Solin's website. Do follow us. But again, this will be up, not this portion, but the webinar will be uploaded. Andrea, you want to speak to anything? We'll send, email out and all of that. Yeah.
No, I thank everyone. This
Good
is
stuff.
actually the longest a meeting has ever gone on. And,
Yes, yes.
Yeah, you would hate the Harvard class. We have a
No, I
2-hour,
love that.
we have a
No,
2-hour time, and students on average, they stay an additional hour after every single class.
No, I love that actually. And actually my students do too.
I know they do. So I know, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yes.
but I love the after conversation, or in the jazz world, what you would call the hang, because that's
Yes.
where some of the most,
This was a great hang.
that's where
It
some
was a
of
great
the
hang,
most
yeah.
valuable and interesting ideas come from. And so I was
Yes,
happy to have it.
yes, yeah.
And
And we just have
Thank
to
you.
see how we can capture this and move forward with it too. I think the working group is probably going to be the place for these deeper conversations. I'm looking to be able to access, the information from these webinars for the working group. So don't be a stranger, all of you. Tracy, Miriam,
one-
for example, we'll
one
likely be
last-
calling on you again.
I would also just say
Oh.
to people like Mirella and other people who are hesitant about, and thank you for your courage to come and participate, but also all the videos that Andrea hangs up are linked to it in YouTube, and YouTube, everything has automatic subtitles that you can put in. So if you think you missed something, please go back and rewatch and you'll be able to see the subtitles. Okay.
Right.
Well, you have access to?
Yes, it's on the G Solon page, right? It'll be there, Andrea, in the next day or so, right? The link.
probably about 3 days.
Yes, yeah. So give it a week, I said, but just go to G
That's okay.
Solon. Yeah, just go to the website and you'll find them all there. And feel free to email us if there.
Okay, I'm going to do that.
And my email, I did put it a few times in the chat already.
Okay, thank you for the
Alrighty.
opportunity.
I
Thank
love this. We don't
you.
even want to go. But
Well,
I
this
guess
is
we
the thing.
have
This
to.
is what Miriam was telling us about the social element and people wanting to be together.
Yes,
I mean, when you
yes,
find people with a common interest, it just
yes.
makes you feel like you could spend the day there.
That's so true.
Great
Wow.
to be with you guys today. Thank you so
All
much.
right.
Thank you so
again.
Thanks
much.
again,
Take
Tracy.
care.
Many, many
Thank
thanks,
you,
Tracy.
everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye-bye. Thank you, Miriam. Thank you so
Thank you
much. for
very
joining.
much. It was wonderful. I hope I have done well because I